Moving on now to some other news. The encounter between the security forces and the terrorists that lasted over 24 hours in Pulwama's Bamnu area finally has ended. 3 terrorists have been gunned down. In a late-night operation that began yesterday, the armed forces blew up a house in which the terrorists were believed to be holed up in. This as part of the government's new anti-terror strategy. On the day of the operation, 2 Jawans also reportedly suffered minor injuries. 10 protesters were injured in the clashes with security forces near the encounter site. The encounter raged after the security forces received specific tip-off about the presence of these terrorists in the area.
In the morning at around 6:30, about presence of 3 to 4 terrorists in the general area, Bimana of Pulwama district. Immediately the parties were launched to the operation site, and we noticed that it is a built-up area where a number of civilian houses were there. The area was cordoned, and our main priority was to evacuate the civilians from the area so that there is no damage to the civilians. It took us around 3 to 4 hours in evacuating the civilians. It was a very difficult operation, but the forces, they shone out of professionalism. And by around morning 7:30, the last firefight had finished. And 2-3 houses, they got burnt in the firefight between the security forces and the terrorists. The search of the houses was carried out. And we have 3 bodies of the terrorists recovered. 3 weapons have been recovered.
Executive Editor, India Today, Gaurav Sawant joins us for more about the encounter that began yesterday in the morning. Gaurav, tell us a little bit more about the new anti-terror operation being adopted by the security forces when they are faced with the situation of finding these terrorists taking refuge in houses.
Increasingly, terrorists are now hiding in built-up areas. Operations in jungles, in the higher reaches, they are much easier because, 1, there is no fear of collateral damage, and 2, terrorists are in an open area. Even though in jungles or in the mountains, they can effectively be neutralized. But here, for the security forces, and I've been talking to a number of soldiers on ground, they say operations in urban built-up areas are extremely difficult. 1, the aim is to ensure that there is no collateral damage, no civilians are killed, and 2, to ensure that property, loss of property is kept at a minimum. Unfortunately, in this, the risk to lives of soldiers increases. For example, if you recall, in the EDI Pampur operation, 2 young officers of the Special Forces were unfortunately killed of the Special Forces. So that is a casualty rate which is unacceptably high. The armies come out with new tactics where when terrorists are holed up inside a building, that building is brought down. That way terrorists are either killed or injured and then can effectively be neutralized. Now the aim there is first for the police and the CRPF to ensure, along with the army's help, that civilians are evacuated as quickly as possible, and that is where loud hailers are used to tell civilians to leave that building. Often there have been instances where terrorists have used locals as hostages, and that is what makes the operation exceptionally difficult.
Right, Gaurav, we leave it at that. Thanks so much for joining us.